feel free to do so. But welcome to learning how to create and use beautiful infographics in your inbound marketing strategy. Now, this masterclass is brought to you, it's a joint venture brought to you by HubSpot Academy and Venngage. And on our next slide, I just want to show you very quickly how we can register to learn more about the Academy team. If you're not familiar with HubSpot Academy, feel free to visit this URL. You can sign up at certification.hubspot.com. So whether you're a marketer, a designer, or even sales professionals, find a lot of value in getting more training from HubSpot Academy. Now, for those of you that are on our broadcast today, I know we have marketers and designers and salespeople from all over the world. And so whether you've created an infographic or you haven't really delved into data visualization just yet, you're going to learn a whole lot today. I know for me, on our next slide, I'm really interested in figuring out how infographics fit into the inbound methodology. So you might notice that infographics isn't listed here. It's not under the attract stage. It's not in the delight stage. So even though infographics isn't in this space, infographics certainly can fit into your inbound marketing strategy. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over. Thank you, Eugene Woo from Venngage, who's going to tell us all about infographics, of course, how it fits into the inbound methodology, and a little bit more about Venngage. So Eugene, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Angela. Hopefully all of you can hear me. So today I'm going to talk about how you can use infographics to attract in the attract stage of the inbound methodology. More specifically, how you can create infographics that are so compelling you can use them to attract visitors, to generate press mentions and leads, and to boost your marketing campaigns. So first off, who am I and what do I do? So my name is Eugene, as Angela mentioned, and I am the co-founder of two infographic sites, Visualize Me and Venngage. Visualize Me is the biggest infographic resume site in the world, and Venngage, which is probably the tool you're more familiar with, is one of the top infographic tools in the market. So I want to start today's class with my own inbound story. So back in 2010, I was working as a software engineer, had a 9-to-5 job. I knew absolutely nothing about infographics. Like, I mean, nothing as in like I had zero design skills, I had zero data skills. Then around 2011, I became an independent consultant. So that meant I was always under pressure to find new jobs and I had to market myself. So I tried a whole bunch of stuff. I was cold emailing and calling a lot of people. I bought AdWords. You know, I did my fair share of stalking prospects on LinkedIn. I tried a lot of traditional marketing methods, but was never that successful. Then around sometime in the early 2011, I saw an infographic that changed my life. So this was an infographic by a guy called Chris Spurlock. He had took his very boring text resume and converted it into this beautiful visual, into an infographic, in fact. And his infographic went viral and eventually landed him his dream job at the Huffington Post. So you can see this is actually his infographic resume. So that really inspired me to create my own infographic resume and eventually inspired me to create a site called Visualize Me. And this was a site where you could create your own infographic resumes. And in order to promote it, I created infographics of famous people. Here's an example of one from Ashton Kutcher, to show how you could visualize your abilities and your skills in a much more beautiful format. This generated a huge amount of inbound traffic and press mentions. You know, I got articles from Forbes, from TechCrunch, Business Insider, and the result was over 200,000 signups or leads from this campaign, from this one campaign alone. Shortly after that, I created Venngage, because I saw the power of infographics, and I wanted to create a tool that allowed everyone, even people without design skills like myself, the ability to create beautiful infographics easily. And can you guess what we use as our marketing strategy? We use inbound marketing or content marketing with infographics. So to target our early stage users and buyers, mostly in the attract or awareness stage, we created a variety of editorial infographics on popular topics such as like millennials, Oscars, on the Oscars, Game of Thrones, and even popular marketing topics such as Pinterest. So we created these infographics to attract users to our site, and also to get press mentions. Over the last 2 years, we've literally had hundreds of our infographics featured on big sites such as Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., Fast Company, and the like. And I'm going to talk about the results. The results were amazing. Like, our traffic grew over 400% last year alone. And on top of that, we've grown our user base to over 1 million users. Of that, over 20,000 are premium or business users. And we're consistently ranked #1 in Google for infographic keywords. All of that mostly because of our inbound marketing efforts using infographics. So why do infographics work? So it's not just a trend, it's not just a fad. I think some of you might have heard that, oh, it's just something that's a trend or a fad. Infographics work because our brains are wired to process visuals compared to text, right? 90% of our information that's transmitted in the brain is visual. So think about it. If you're trying to memorize something complex, the way to do it is to visualize it, right? It's to use word picture associations. This is how we as humans process information. So there's a lot of science and basic biology behind the effectiveness of infographics. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that infographics is a good way, it's a superior and good way to communicate your story. And what I want to do today is I want to go over the 5 steps of creating infographics. And this is a process that we use ourselves in Venngage. So, we're in the trenches every day, and this is our process. I'm also going to show you our own method called the I-Core method for picking the best visuals. Then I'm going to share some design principles and design hacks to make your infographics beautiful. And lastly, I'll show you a shortcut to take it to the next level. So who is this class for? Right, infographics are used by many people, but specifically if you're a marketer and you want to use infographics for your inbound campaigns, this is classes for you. You want to improve your organic or SEO rankings, this class is for you. Even if you're not a marketer, maybe you're a storyteller, an analyst, or a researcher, and you want to integrate your visual content into your stories, this class is for you. And lastly, if you want to communicate data and results effectively, this class will also be very relevant to you. Okay, let's jump right in. The next thing I'm going to cover is the 5 key steps to great infographics. Step #1 is to pick a great topic. Okay, this seems rather obvious, I know, but this is something that's overlooked a lot, right? People rush into the topic selection. And what do I mean by topic? This is basically what your infographic is about and what the core message you want to deliver, right? So what people usually do is they spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes, they brainstorm, and then they pick this rather obvious topic, or rather, topic that's been done many, many times. And then they spend the next 2 weeks doing all the hard work, the research, the design, iterating through it. And then when they publish it, no one cares. Like, no clicks, no shares, nothing. Why is that? I'm sure this has happened to you. It has happened to us before, back in the early days. Like, we would publish an infographic and no one would care about it. People don't care because it's a very noisy world. Like, all of you know this. You've got social media, you've got email, you've got so much noise in this world, right? And if your topic doesn't resonate, if it's not something new and fresh, no one's going to care. So no one's going to care about yet another infographic about the top 10 email marketing tools. It's been done 100 times. So in fact, we did a study recently. If you go to our blog, you can find, search for content benchmark. We did a content benchmarking study, and looked at over 100,000 articles. And essentially these include infographics, text articles, videos, all kinds of articles, and found that the vast majority of them had 0 shares or 0 likes. Essentially, no one even clicked on them, right? So how do you get people to care? You get people to care by first and foremost picking a good topic. And the way to pick a good topic, so I'm going to share a few tips. The best way to pick a good topic is to solve a burning problem. How do you do that, right? You need to know your audience and you need to know their problems. So the one way that we do is, the one thing that you can do is you can ask your audience. So we periodically send out an email, like I would send out an email to a few of our select users and basically ask them, what are you struggling with? What are the problems that you have? Another way is you can solve your own problem. For example, we recently did an infographic on how to increase traffic and revenue with infographics. And it's on our blog. It's one of the best performing articles and infographics that we have on our blog right now. Here's a couple more examples of topics, infographic topics that solve burning problems. So I'm not a morning person, but I want to be a morning person. So the infographics on how to take back your mornings with good tips resonates with me, right? Okay, so the next tip I want to share on how to pick a good topic is to challenge the status quo. So a lot of us are afraid of upsetting our audience. In fact, we're way too overprotective of our audience. So as a result, we come up with these really safe and boring topics that no one cares about, right? So what you need to do is you need to challenge your audience. You need to push the status quo. And here's some examples from one of my favorite, marketers out there, Gary Vee. So Gary Vee is this social media guru, and he doesn't do infographics, but he writes articles, and the topics that he picks always challenges the status quo, right? So when people are talking about how Super Bowl ads during Super Bowl season are so expensive, he's talking about how they're not expensive enough, and he backs it up. He owns a social agency, and he talks about how maybe you don't need a social agency. Right, so recently we did one where we looked at Twitter hashtags and we essentially called them worthless. We did the research, we backed it up with data, we backed it up with our own reasonings, and we concluded, that hashtags aren't that useful. So that's another example. So how do you do this? So this is a quick exercise that everyone can do real easily to just push, sort of get used to pushing the boundaries. Think of 3 status quo things, 3 things that are given in your job, in your field, or in your industry. So for example, if you work for an ad agency, you can write down, Super Bowl ads are really expensive. All companies need to hire an agency. You need to spend a lot of money on social media, right? And then you just reverse it and figure out, do the research behind it to back up your reasonings. Okay, the next tip I want to share on how to pick good topics is to change the perspective. What do I mean by that? So there's always a traditional way of telling your story. There's always a traditional way. But if you take that same story and you change the perspective of it, you reframe the question, it's going to be a lot more interesting. And I'm going to show you an example how you can do this. Right, so the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is founded by the former CEO of Microsoft, has been trying to get people to care about malaria. So they're fighting malaria in Africa. And one of the biggest gaps is getting the people in the first world to care about it, because there's a big gap. We're very far removed from it. So instead of presenting the problem in a conventional way, and here's an example of a conventional infographic way, conventional infographic on malaria, you list out the mortality rate, the toll, you compare different intervention rates. This sounds very familiar, right? So instead of doing that, the Gates Foundation came up with this other infographic, which is the one on the right. And they looked at the perspective of which are the world's most deadliest animals. And they created a simple infographic that simply compared animals by the number of people killed per year. So the result is surprising. Like, most people are very surprised when they see that mosquitoes are by far the #1 killer of human beings, a lot more than the second animal, if you don't count humans, like more than 10 times bigger than any other animal. In fact, this infographic went viral. You might have seen it a couple of years ago, and it worked really well. It worked really well to get people to care. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, that you will think about creating good topics. Now that you have your topic, the next step, step number 2, is to do research, right? Most people at this stage will start going into their browsers and start Googling the topic, and then, sort of have this, do this ad hoc research. They'll cherry pick some data and put it all together into a document and get started. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm going to show you a structured way to do your research. This is what we found to be very effective. So we structure our research by forming a question pyramid. So what's a question pyramid? Question pyramid is just a bunch of questions that are structured in a pyramid. So you have one question on the top. This is the main question for your topic. So you start out with only one question. What is the main question in your topic? And then you get 2 to 3 supporting questions that drill a bit deeper into the main questions. So these are the what or which kinds of questions. And then lastly, you follow up with some probing questions. These are the why and sort of the insight questions. So I'm going to show you an example. So if you remember the Pinterest infographic that we did an infographic on what makes an infographic popular on Pinterest, right? So the main question there was that, what makes an infographic popular on Pinterest? And then the supporting questions were, what were the most popular topics? Was it infographics on travel, infographics on food, on gardening? What were the most popular topics? And then what styles and types of infographics work best? So these meant like, font styles, color schemes, illustration styles, chart types, and so forth. And then we also had another question on length. Does length even matter? And then lastly, the follow-up questions were, why do certain characteristics matter? Okay, so you have your question pyramid. Your next step, which is step number 3, is to collect your data to answer those questions. So there's a few ways you can collect data. One way is to look for existing sources of data. So there's a lot of data out there. For example, if you want government data, you can go to data.gov, US government data. You want industry data, statista.com. Public opinion data, you can look into Pew Research or Gallup. Google even has a public data directory you can look at. So we have a blog article on Venngage. To go to our blog and search for it with a long list of places you can find data sources. Okay, another place you can find data, which is often overlooked, is from academic research. So every day there's tons and tons of research being published in academic journals. There's lots of researchers, academics, professors doing lots of research with lots of good data. So a good spot to also take a look is in Google Scholar and Google Books. So Google Books also contains journals that are published as books. And the last way to get data, and probably the most important way, is to do original research. So if you've picked a truly great topic, something that's really unique, chances are no one has done it before, right? And if you've done that and you've searched all those sites that I just mentioned and you found nothing, well, congratulations, right? You have something really interesting, something really good there. And so you need to do some original research. So there's manual data collection that you can do. This is what we did with the Pinterest infographic study. You can use automatic data collection methods. You can ask or hire a research company to get that data for you, and you can conduct your own experiments and polls. Okay, so you've done your research, you have all your data. What do you do next? So the next step, step number 4, is you need to turn that data into visual candy. You need to visualize the data, all the information, right? So this is the crux of the course. How do you best pick the visuals to tell your story and to communicate your data? So we use a method called the I-Core method. This is a goal-driven method. That means we ask ourselves, what is the goal of each visual? What do we want the reader to achieve, or what do we want to achieve in each visual? Right? And for each of these goals, so we categorize goals into 6 different goals, and that makes up, and that's the acronym ICORE. So ICORE is actually an acronym, and it stands for Inform, Compare, Change, Organize, Relationships, and Explore. So what is the goal of the visual? If you want to convey an important message and a simple data point, then that's inform. So this means you just want to convey one number, one percentage, something simple. That's inform in the ICORE. If you want to compare multiple things or parts of whole, then that's compare. If you want to show change or trends over time, that's the next C in ICORE. If you want to show organization of data, if you want to organize your data and you want to show groups, ranks, order, or patterns, that's organized, that's O. If you want to review relationships between two or more different things or concepts, that is relationships. That's the R in ICORE. And lastly, if you want the reader to explore the data themselves and sort of discover the insights, that's explore. So ICORE stands for one of each of these goals. And for each of these goals, they are best practices, like the most effective visual form to achieve these goals. So for inform, so if your goal was just to inform someone or your audience of something simple, one data point, like we have 2,700 users, 65% of coffee consumption takes place in the morning. And if you are, Slack and you just want to say we got 500,000 users, you don't even need to use a chart. Large fonts and labels will do the trick. Right? You can also use pictograms or percentages if the number can be represented in a pictogram or in an icon. Okay, so if your goal is to compare multiple things or multiple categories or values, here are all the charts you can use. So you can use a bar chart, a column chart, a stack chart, a bubble chart, and so forth. If you wanted to compare parts of whole, you can use a pie chart, a donut chart, a stack chart, a pictogram, or a tree map. What if you wanted to look at change? What if your goal was to look at change over time or trends? So the obvious thing here is to use a line chart. So you can use a line chart or a column chart, a bubble chart. If you have less than 5 points in time, a bubble chart will work. You can use a combination of a line and a column chart. You can use an area chart. And lastly, you can use a timeline. What if you wanted to compare spatial changes? So spatial changes means, I don't mean outer space, I mean geographic space. So the obvious visual form is to use a map, or a chloroplast map, for example, is a kind of map that has different colors for different values, right? If you wanted to show that change over time and space, you can use small multiples. So small multiples is essentially repeating the chart over different points in time. So the example here is I've got a map for each decade. So I've got a map for 1960, 1970, 1980, 90, and so forth and so forth. And you basically just repeat it over different points in time. It's not, small multiples are not limited to maps. You can use any other chart. You can use a bubble chart and repeat it. You can use a pie chart and repeat it, and so forth. Okay, so what if your goal was to show an organization of data? You want to organize a lot of data into maybe rank or order. So to show rank or order, you can use a bar or a column chart, a list or a table if it's mainly text-based and it's a very, you've got lots and lots and lots of values. And you can use bubble and pyramid if you have a hierarchy, if you want to also convey hierarchy. If you want to show organized groups, so groups of things together, you can use a bubble cloud, and then you use colors. So you use colors and tones to group certain things together. So related to that is also the word cloud. So you can group certain words together using color and then and size to denote the value, right? And icon charts works the same way. You can pick similar icons to sort of show things that are related. Okay, so we're down to the R on I-Course. So R stands for relationship. If you want to show relationship between two or more things, right? For example, you want to show the relationship between marketing and sales, or the relationship between, let's say, obesity and commuting time. These are the visual forms that you can use. You can use a scatter plot or a line chart, column chart, a combo. You can show word cloud, bubble cloud, and a Venn diagram. So you can use a Venn diagram if you want to show relationships, especially overlapping relationships. So lastly is explore. So the last goal is explore. So this is when you want the user to explore the data themselves. You're going to have to create interactive charts, interactive visuals. So this means the user can click on them or what we call drill down into the charts. So that means having different layers. So for example, they can click onto a state and then you drill down into the county level, or if you can pick a category and then it drills down into that category, and so forth and so forth. There's different levels of interaction. So explore is definitely an advanced way of data of visualization, but it's very effective if you have the resources to do it. Okay, so how do you apply the I-Core method, right? So if you remember, we had the question pyramids, we had all the questions and all the data. So for each question, you basically just choose an I-Core goal. So for example, here, going back to our example of the Pinterest infographic, for the first question, I would just want to inform. For the second question, I want people to compare different topics. For the third question, I want to rank the different styles and types of infographic. And then the last question, I want to show the relationship between length and popularity. So after you pick the I-Core goal, essentially, you can then choose the visual form. So you go back to the guide that I just went over, and you can pick one of the many visual forms that work the best for that goal. So for example, large labels, column chart, word cloud, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. And I'm going to throw in a quick pop quiz right now. Okay, so a couple of months ago, Hillary Clinton tweeted this Venn diagram to show the relationship between gun owners and Americans, and there's an overlap that said, there's a big overlap that said that there's a lot of them that both sides support universal background checks. So I'm not trying to be political. In fact, I'm from Canada. I'm not going to vote. This is just a very relevant example for what I just talked about, because right after she tweeted this, there was a whole bunch of reaction. Mainly negative reaction. And on the right, you will see that the Washington Post actually dedicated an entire article criticizing the chart, and they came up with their own chart. So they said, this is the right way, we're fixing Hillary Clinton's terrible Venn diagram on gun control. They made their own chart, which looks like a stack, sort of like a stack bar chart. It has very precise numbers in there. It has some color tone to denote the overlap and all of that. So take about 10 seconds, look at both charts, and tell me, well, I guess you can't tell me, but just think, which one do you think is which one is the better, or is the better chart or the better visual? Who is correct? Is Hillary Clinton's Venn diagram correct, or is the Washington Post stack bar graph correct? Okay, so usually when I do this, with an audience, I usually can see the responses. I cannot see the response right now, but usually it's pretty split. You usually have two camps. So what's the answer? So the answer is both of them are correct. So this was a trick question. Both of them are correct because they both have different goals. So if you can read the title, different goals, different charts. And if you remember I-Core, you choose your goal and then you choose your chart. So Hillary Clinton's goal was just to make a simple point that there was an overlap between two groups of people. and she posted it on Twitter. So she has, presumably milliseconds of attention. So she can't use a complicated chart. She chose something really simple. Washington Post, on the other hand, has, it posted this on their newspaper. People read long form articles. They spend 5-10 minutes, so they could go into a lot of detail. You can spend 5 minutes trying to decipher this chart and understand everything, and you can be very precise. So both the Washington Post and Hillary Clinton have different goals. Like they have different audiences, slightly different audiences, different goals, and different channels. So they can use different charts. Neither is right nor neither is wrong. They're both right. So if there's one thing that you can take away from this, is that function before form, right? You always pick the function or the goal before you pick the form. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. The fifth step, so there were 5 steps. Now that you've picked all your visuals, is you got to put it all together into a beautiful infographic. Right, so how do you do that? So I'm going to give you some design hacks or design tips on how to make your infographic beautiful. So the first thing is to use a grid layout. So that means you use a standard grid. This is the easiest way to lay out an infographic. So there's all kinds of grids available. You can use a 2-column grid, a 3-column grid, 3 rows, and a combination of them. But use a grid layout, right? Instead of a free-flowing infographic. And this is how it looks like when you fill it up with visuals. This is how it looks like. It looks very organized. Everything is aligned, and it just looks so much better. Okay, the next thing is you need to build a natural information flow. So all good information design follows an information flow. This means you need to put the most important things on the top and on the right. So this is how readers read information, right? They read from the top and then they read left to right, at least readers in the Western world. So that means you need to put the most important question right at the top, followed by the second most important question, followed by the third most important question, so forth and so forth. So the flow you need to follow follows the natural flow of your eye or your audience, right? Okay, the third design tip I want to share is you got to pick a good color palette. So picking colors is very important because it really brings out the aesthetics. So if you have a good color scheme or a good color palette, and here are some examples. Here's another example. Here's one which is mainly blue. It makes a lot of difference. And you guys may be saying, hey, I'm not a designer. How do I know which colors go with each other? So there's lots of tools out there. So there's online color tools that you can use. You can Google them, but here are a couple of my favorite: Color Lovers and Coolers.co, Lowell Colors and DesignSeats.com. All of them are pretty much the same. You just go in there, you can pick palettes, you can browse and pick palettes, or you can put in one color and then it will suggest all the other palettes that go with that one color. Okay, the fourth tip on design is to structure your typography. This is basically what designers call font pairing. So just like how you have wine pairing or cheese pairings, fonts are the same thing. Some fonts just go with other fonts, and some fonts just don't look good with other fonts, right? So a lot of times when you see an infographic and you can't really put your finger to why it doesn't look good, a lot of times it's the font. Like the font pairing or just isn't that good. So in an infographic, you have 3 levels of font typically. There's the header font, there's the sub-header font, and the body font. So I'll show you some examples how that's used. So you can see here's an infographic. The main, obviously the header font goes on top, and then the sub-headers are each section, and then the body font is like more explanation. So again, you need to pick good font pairings. The next design tip is to use icons to reinforce text. So if you have a very text-heavy infographic, for example, here's one that we did on the history of Google I/O. So Google I/O is this big show that Google does where they introduce their new products, sort of like the Apple show. And you can see that it's very text-heavy on the left, and on the right, we've put some icons in there. And that's because sometimes pictures do count. are worth 1,000 words, right? They really make it so much easier to understand the text and to reinforce what you're saying. Tip number 6 on design is to create negative space. So this is the less is more concept, right? One of the biggest mistakes beginners make in infographics or design is to try and like put as much as they can on that page. So this design hack says the opposite, like take out as much as you can. So less is more. So you need to create negative space in your page or in your infographic. If not, it just looks very cluttered. It doesn't look good. So the way we do it is we always have good margins for each visual. Good, 10 to 20% margins, sometimes even 30% negative space around each visual. Okay, the last tip is to use colors and size to highlight, the data or the point that you want to make. So if you look at the example on the left, there's a chart, there's a bar chart there, and we're trying to highlight, big data, the word big data. So because this chart was about the birth and the reported death of big data. And it's very difficult to see, where big data is, right? Use a different color and it just pops out. It's so much easier. So you can use color to contrast and to highlight certain pieces of information. Here's another example. So this example uses size. So we're trying to say 31% of all households were in 4 states, right? And on the left, we basically just wrote everything in the same size and same color, and you can't see it. Like, it's very difficult. On the right, we've used a much larger font and we've changed the color. So immediately the 31% just jumps out. So much easier to read, so much easier to understand. Okay, so hopefully that was very useful to you. And these are the design tips that we use a lot. And this is what we teach our users as well. I know I bombarded you with a ton of information. It was all good stuff though. And I can understand if a lot of you are a bit overwhelmed. But don't worry, because I'm going to share with you a shortcut. Okay, so one of the most effective shortcuts we've found, and this is after talking to thousands and thousands of our users, are premium templates. So premium templates are essentially these templates that they are special templates that we've designed that embody all of the design principles and all of the best practices that I just talked about. So that means these templates have good color schemes or good color palettes. We've taken care in finding good font pairings. The layouts follow a very grid layout, and everything is aligned. We use good negative space, and we use color to highlight certain things. So essentially, the premium template embodies all of these things. And what we found was that if you use a premium template, it will save you between 10 and 20 hours of design time, versus you starting, creating something from scratch. So there are hundreds of premium templates and business templates in our tool, and we constantly add new ones every week. So you can go to our site, venngage.com. You can just click on templates, and you can see all of the different premium templates on our tool. How do you get the premium templates? One way to get the premium templates is you can sign up for a business plan. So we have a business plan for marketers and business people. It's called the business plan. And with the business plan, you'll get not only the premium templates, we also have a brand kit where you can keep your font pairings and your color palettes. It comes with live workshops and one-on-one concierge service. And you also become a part of a private community group where you can get feedback and support from our staff. Okay, so if you're interested in this shortcut, you want to sign up for the business plan, I'm gonna help you out today. So you can sign up for a business plan today with a promo code. Let's see, where is that promo code? So that promo code is inbound66. It will drop the price from our $49 a month to $35 a month. If you sign up for the yearly plan, it's only $27 a month. Okay, so this code is going to be valid for 3 days, so it will expire at the end of this week on Friday. Okay, so write the promo code down, inbound66. I'm going to go to the next screen. It'll be gone. All right, so I'm going to recap. So we're almost done. I'm going to recap. So I covered 5 steps to creating infographics. So here they are. If you remember, number 1, you need to pick a great topic. Number 2, you need to have a research strategy by building a question pyramid with 3 to 5 questions. Then you have to do the work, collect the data, do the research, collect the data, and analyze the data. Then you need to determine the goal with a method that we call I-Core, and then you can pick the appropriate visual type for each of the visual. And lastly, you can apply some of the design tips or design hacks to make your infographic beautiful. And of course, there's a shortcut. You can use our business. You can sign up for the business plan, use some of our premium templates. Okay, so thank you very much. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact me directly. My email is just eugene@venngage.com, or you can visit us at venngage.com. We have live chat that you can just ask your question there as well. I will answer all your questions if you email me. So it may take me a day or two, but I will answer all your questions about infographics, about marketing with infographics, or any of the things that we just talked about today. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hand this back over to Angela.
Thanks, Eugene. I just want to thank everyone once again for joining us for this joint adventure, our masterclass on infographics. Eugene, I really enjoyed learning about infographics. I think my favorite part was hearing about the I-Core method. It can be really difficult once you've done the research. How do you display that data? How do you turn it into an infographic and make it look great? So thank you for sharing that I-Core method with us today, as well as all of those other tips. And for those of you that are still on the line, please feel free to get in touch with Eugene. As he mentioned, you can get it at venngage.com, or you can use the hashtag HubSpot Masterclass at any time. We'll be listening on Twitter. Thanks, everyone, and have a nice day.